everyone, Just Ash here, and today I'm going to tell you why I love East Asian cinema, in particular Japanese, Chinese and Korean horrors / thrillers. So Asian horror and thriller movies have always had a really special place in my heart. It started when I was 14 years old, a hardcore emo and completely obsessed with Japanese horror, and just kind of grew from there. My top 5 movies in this genre are all Asian, and it is literally just because I find them so much more suspenseful and artistic than Western movies of the same type. They tend to have an extra layer of subtlety to them, and this is sometimes paired with an ambiguity that leaves the ending or characters open to interpretation by the audience. Or they focus on psychological horrors, and this sometimes comes with the added benefit of a little bit of extra gore, which is kind of a guilty pleasure of mine. All of this comes packaged with beautiful cinematography and direction, which just makes them so pleasing to watch. Now, Eastern horror movies tend to be very insular. The films will often focus on a handful of characters in 1 or 2 settings, and if there is a wider range of characters or settings, then the story is very, very focused on one point and very easy to follow. There also don't tend to be all that many subplots, which means you're not going to get a romance plot completely take over the plot. God, I said plot a lot then. I'm not being distracted by chopping backwards and forwards between different plot lines or characters. I can just sit down, I can focus, and I can allow myself to be really drawn in. For example, take Tale of Two Sisters by Korean director jee-woon. This movie focuses on, at most, 6 characters, and 2 of them are only there for a couple of scenes. There are only a couple of scenes that take place outside of the main setting, which is the family house, and these scenes are very short and exist only to advance the plot. The suspense in Tale of Two Sisters comes from the hints that something is very wrong and that something is going on that you can't quite grasp at first. There isn't an over-reliance on jump scares or shaky cam action sequences which seem to plague Western horror movies. The suspense and the foreshadowing that causes that suspense in Tale of Two Sisters is a lot more subtle and understated. Compare this to the Western remake, which is called The Uninvited, which adds extra characters, extra scenes, extra settings, and even an explosion, and it all just comes across as a bit muddled, and it's not a very good film. So Eastern films, and particularly the ones that focus on psychological horrors, tend to leave a lot of ambiguity in their plots as well. Often, plot points are left to be interpreted by the viewer, as are character interpretations. In Audition, directed by Takeshi Miike, and this will spoil the ending of the movie, so if you haven't seen it yet, I recommend you stop listening for the next 10 to 15 seconds. Asami, the main antagonist, is pushed down the stairs and appears to be killed by the fall. However, Aoyama, I think that's how you pronounce that, sees her moving and trying to talk. Now, this is left open to interpretation in that we don't know if she actually survived the fall and was trying to talk, or if the torture scene directly before this one has driven Aoyama mad and he is seeing things. I'd also like to add in here that while Asian horror movies are heralded as being incredibly gory, often the gore is used with discretion. It's not used as often so that it can have just a little bit more of an impact when it is used, and the same goes for violence. Now, don't get me wrong, I know there are plenty of movies out there like Tokyo Gore Police and Ichi the Killer who use lots of gore, lots of violence, and are just a little bit over the top. But in other movies, it's much more discreet. It's not over the top. It adds a bit more of an impact than just having the characters soaked in blood, shooting monsters left, right and centre. There's also a lot of non-linear storytelling going on. Quite often, the audience will not know all of the plot straight away. And this tends to be the first clue that something is off, something is being obscured or hidden, and there will be a twist. There is almost always a twist. Sometimes the films will start with the ending scene taken out of context and then move back to the beginning of the story and basically do a how we got here kind of thing. These are great. I spend almost the entire runtime of movies like that trying to guess how we got here. I never guess. On the other hand, there will sometimes be flashbacks set throughout the entire movie. Battle Royale is a perfect example of this. The flashbacks serve as exposition and show how we got here, but they also show how characters are motivated in the way that they are, and serve as a nice stark contrast between how life used to be and the tragic circumstances that the characters have found themselves in now. The film may also hide key plot elements from the audience which will then be revealed in a flashback at the ending. Tale of Two Sisters does this perfectly, and I'm not going to spoil it here because I highly recommend that you all go and watch that movie. But basically the explanation links us really nicely back to the beginning of the movie. And again, telling a story in this way just increases the suspense for me. I spend the entire time trying to guess the twist, trying to work out what's being hidden, trying to spot clues and foreshadowing that I might have missed on an earlier rewatch, and it feels so satisfying to just have everything click into place and be like, that's why the wall is painted black. That's a terrible example, I'm really sorry. And following on from that, often there is a lot of hidden detail in the movie itself. Whether this is in the cinematography, the story itself, or even small directorial decisions, there is often layer upon layer of detail and foreshadowing, all hidden throughout the entire thing. However, the foreshadowing isn't always super subtle. Dumplings by Fruit Chan, which is a Chinese sort of psychological horror slash thriller slash gross out movie. It's real gross. And it's probably the least subtle with its details, where you as the viewer will know what is going on far before the plot explains it, but you still make it halfway into the story before it's explicitly stated what the twist is. And I'm not going to tell you the twist now. A, because I don't want to spoil it. B, because it's really, really gross. Please be careful if you Google this movie, especially if you are squeamish or at all sensitive in any way. It is not a nice twist. But like I said, the details can also be a lot more subtle and less in your face. Going back to Audition, because it is my favourite, at the beginning of the movie there is a lot of soft focus in the scenes. Everyone is wearing very light, pastel coloured clothes, and the lighting is very bright and natural. Now, as the movie progresses and the plot gets darker and the themes throughout the movie get darker, the cinematography follows. The lighting changes from bright naturals to being bathed in red and being very harsh. The characters themselves begin wearing darker clothing with richer textures, and the focus within scenes is more stark and crisp and clear. And in fact, all of this signifies that we are approaching the film's climax, which mixes all of these things. There's lots of very rich colours. The colour red is very prevalent, and it is all done in a very stark contrast with a very, very minimal yet creepy soundtrack. This sort of thing also happens in Lady Vengeance by Korean director Park Chan-wook. Lady Vengeance starts off very brightly coloured, and by the end of the movie is completely in black and white, again mirroring the film's central themes. So yeah, that's why I love Eastern cinema, especially horrors and thrillers. I find them so much more subtle and suspenseful than Western movies, and whether that's because it's easy to get engrossed in an ambiguous and mysterious plot, or because I'm watching trying to spot all of the little hidden details, I don't know. However, that's not to say all Western films in this genre are absolute trash, just a lot of them are. If you want to experience an English language film that is very similar to watching an Asian thriller, I highly recommend Stoker. It is directed by Park Chan-wook, who I mentioned earlier. He directed Lady Vengeance. It's filmed, set, and directed in a way that is very similar to Asian thrillers, specifically Korean thrillers, because obviously Park Chan-wook is a Korean man, and it hits every single beat that I have mentioned in this video. There is a layer of subtlety, ambiguity, there's a lot of non-linear storytelling, the cinematography is beautiful, there's a lot of hidden detail within the cinematography as well, so highly recommended. And it's written by Wentworth Miller. Yeah, the Prison Break guy. He has written one of my favourite Western thrillers, and I was genuinely surprised to find out that it was him that had written it. And while I don't want to say too much about the plot, I will say it's about a young girl whose mysterious uncle comes into her life on the day of her father's funeral. And that's really all I can tell you without spoiling anything. So please, if you want to watch an Asian thriller but don't want to jump straight into it, watch Stoker first. It's a fantastic movie. It's highly recommended. I don't recommend films very often because I do have quite a niche taste, but seriously, go and watch that film if you haven't watched it already. Right, I think that's probably enough for this video. Do you guys prefer Eastern or Western thrillers? Please let me know in the comments below. If you've liked this video, please give it a big thumbs up. And as always, pour yourself a nice cup of tea and join me next Friday at 8 for the next video.